Some women pack hope in trunks of linen and lace. Others come with nothing but a name and a letter folded too many times. Clara Wynne came with less than most. A widow's daughter, a housemaid since 12, a heart that still believes stubbornly in second chances. She had answered a mail-order ad from a man in Wyoming Territory, Ephraim Tate. Said he needed a wife who could cook 10 animals and keep the home steady. Clara didn't pretend to be more than she was. Didn't claim fine manners or a dowry or charm. She wrote, "I have no dowry, no family to speak of, but I can clean baked bread that holds together, and I do not complain in the cold." Weeks later, his reply came, "Come, we'll build something better together." She borrowed a skirt, mended her only boots, rode 5 days by train to reach Windermere Station. But when she stepped down from the rail car, dusty and rumpled from the ride, Ephraim wasn't there. Instead, a man stood in his place, tall, lean, holding a note. "He changed his mind," the man said. "Said you look too thin. Said you probably don't bring much with you." "Sorry, miss." The station master looked away. A porter coughed awkwardly. A child stared. Clara folded the note again, like it hadn't already broken something inside her. She sat on the bench, hands folded in her lap, and waited for the sting to pass. It didn't, but she didn't cry. Some women are born with safety, others are born with fight. Clara had only what she could carry and the quiet kind of dignity that doesn't ask for permission. But what happens when even your best isn't enough for someone to wait at the station? How do you keep giving when life has only taught you how to survive with less? Clara didn't leave the station that night. There was no place to go, no coin for a room. The station master offered her the bench in the ladies' waiting room. She took it with quiet thanks, folding her shawl into a pillow and turning her back to the oil lamp so the tears wouldn't show. By morning, her stomach ached. Not from sorrow, from hunger. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small parcel wrapped in cloth. Inside was the only thing she'd made with her own hands, a round of oat bread baked before she left, meant for the first shared meal with her would-be husband. She sat beneath the covered platform and ate slowly, one bite, then two. A little boy nearby, barefoot and dirty-cheeked, watched her from behind a barrel. His shirt was thin, his fingers twitching toward his mouth. Clara paused, then broke the bread in half and extended her hand. "Would you like some?" she asked softly. The boy hesitated, then nodded. He didn't say thank you, just ran back behind the barrel to eat in quiet gulps. A moment later, an older man emerged from the station side door, tall, weathered, with a streak of gray through his beard and coal dust on his cuffs. He watched her for a moment, then said, "Not many would share the last they've got." Clara stood brushing crumbs from her lap. It wasn't much. Still, he said, "You shared it." She offered a polite nod and turned to leave. "Wait," he said. "What's your name?" "Clara Wynne." "You waiting on someone?" was she said. He didn't press, just nodded. "My name's Josiah Finch. I run the freight carts out of town." She looked him over, not unkindly. He was older than she'd expected. Broad-shouldered, heavy boots, hands like worn leather. "I could use someone who knows how to pack right," he added, "if you're not in a hurry." Clara blinked. "You're offering work. I'm offering a clean start. Pays not much, but it's honest." She studied him. He didn't offer a smile, didn't tip his hat or try to charm her, just waited, and for some reason that made her trust him more. "I'll do it," she said quietly. He nodded once. "Meet me here tomorrow sunrise." And just like that, the woman who had nothing to give gave away her bread and got her first offer not born of pity. Sometimes the world doesn't reward you for being kind, but sometimes someone notices anyway. But what happens when kindness opens a door and you're not sure whether to walk through it with your whole heart or just your hands? When your whole life has been about proving your worth, what do you do when someone finally stops asking you to? Clara met Josiah at sunrise as promised. He didn't ask questions, just handed her a pair of worn gloves, pointed to the cart and said, "You take the light crates, quilts, flour sacks, small tools. Leave the grain barrels to me." So she worked, not because she had something to prove, but because work felt familiar. Safe. They rode out each morning, with the freight wagon dropping off parcels to cabins scattered across the prairie. Sometimes it took hours to reach a home. Sometimes the folks weren't there, and Josiah would leave goods on the porch with a note always signed the same J. Finch & Co. After the third delivery, Clara asked who's the co. He glanced at her. A habit. But by the end of the week, he started writing J. Finch and Miss C. When it made her hands shake a little, but she didn't say a word. At night, he let her sleep in the corner room of his cabin. Nothing improper, just space. Clean sheets, a door that didn't lock. One night over stew, he asked, "You always work this hard?" She shrugged, always had to. "You don't hear," she set her spoon down. "Why do you say that?" He took a breath. "Because you already belong, Clara. You don't need to earn it." She went quiet. No one had ever said that to her. Not the family she cleaned for. Not the men who wrote her letters only to change their minds when they saw her name or guessed her station. Not even her father, who once told her, "It's good you know how to mop floors. You won't have much else to offer." She wanted to believe Josiah. Wanted to. But believing she could be kept around just because she was not, because of what she did, felt too dangerous, too fragile. She smiled faintly, thanked him for supper, and washed the dishes twice as well that night. Some burdens we lay down slowly, not because they're heavy, but because we've carried them for so long, we forget they aren't part of us. But what happens when someone offers you a future, and all you've ever known is scraping by in the present? How do you face a past that tried to define you when you've only just begun to believe it was wrong? The freight run that morning took them to Alder Creek, a growing town with new storefronts and eyes that liked to measure strangers. Clara carried a bundle of dried goods toward the grocer's door when she heard it Clara Wynne. Her heart stalled. That voice, that tone. She turned slowly. It was Mrs. Penwell, the preacher's wife from back home. The one who used to remind Clara she wasn't marriage material, but made a fine cleaning girl. Standing beside her was her daughter Edith, pale, lace-trimmed, just as smug as Clara remembered. "I hardly recognized you," Mrs. Penwell said. "Heard you left in disgrace." "A mail-order bride, was it?" Clara said nothing. "Did he send you back?" Edith asked, eyes wide and sharp. "I suppose he saw what he got." Josiah stepped forward from the cart, slow and calm. "He saw her and changed his mind," he said. Mrs. Penwell smirked. "Exactly." But Josiah added he changed it the wrong way. The women blinked. Josiah turned to Clara. "I saw her too. And I've been trying to earn the right to keep seeing her ever since." Then without fanfare, he reached for the crate in Clara's arms. "Let's go, Miss Wynne," he said loud enough for all to hear. "We have work to do." He didn't wait for the women to reply, and Clara, still trembling, followed him back to the wagon. They rode in silence for half a mile before she whispered, "You didn't have to do that. I know. You embarrassed them." "No," he said. "They did that themselves." She blinked away tears. "I didn't think I'd ever hear someone speak for me." Josiah glanced at her. "I wasn't speaking for you," he said gently. "I was speaking with you. And if I overstepped, I'm sorry." She shook her head. "You didn't." That night back at the cabin, she found a small bouquet of wild sage sitting on her windowsill. No note, just a quiet symbol that said, "I see you, not your poverty, not your past, just you." Sometimes healing begins not with forgetting, but with being witnessed and not flinching. But what happens when someone finally makes you feel worthy and your heart starts to want more than safety? What does it mean when someone leaves a door open, not out of politeness, but because they hope you'll stay? Clara stayed longer than she meant to. What started as a day's work turned into a week, then two. She stopped counting. Josiah never asked how long she planned to remain. He just kept making space for her. A mug on the shelf, a shawl draped near the door, a second towel folded beside his own. One evening as they returned from town, the sky let loose cold spring rain pounding the wagon roof. By the time they got inside, they were soaked to the bone. He tossed her a dry shirt, his, and turned away so she could change in peace. Later, by the fire wrapped in a quilt too big for one person, she looked at him and asked softly, "Did you ever think you'd live with a woman again?" He stirred the coals. After Margaret passed, he said, "I didn't think I'd live with anyone again. Didn't think I'd want to." He turned to her, voice low. "But I do now." She held her breath. Then, not needing to fill the silence, she simply said, "I don't want to be a guest here." "You're not," he said. "You never were." She blinked. "Then what am I?" He looked at her the way you do when naming something sacred. You're the piece that came missing, he said. She didn't cry, but her fingers found his hand near the fire, and neither of them pulled away. Later that night, as she passed through the kitchen to find her shawl, she noticed the back door, usually closed, left slightly ajar. She reached for the latch to shut it, but paused. There was something about it staying open, like a quiet invitation. A gesture of trust, a way of saying if you need to leave you can, but if you want to stay, you're already home. Some homes are not built from wood and stone, but from steady hands, warm silence, and doors that never lock behind you. But can a woman who spent her life being passed over learn how to choose someone back without fear? How do you know when you've stopped surviving and started belonging? Clara began to move through the cabin like she might stay. Not all at once, just little things. She placed her comb on the windowsill, left her apron hanging near the stove, set out 2 plates instead of one without being asked. Josiah noticed, but he didn't name it. He simply began doing the same. A second cup of coffee in the morning, a fresh bar of soap set beside hers, an old rocking chair pulled from the barn, cleaned and sanded, placed on the porch beside his. They sat there some evenings in quiet, watching the sky turn gold. No promises, no pressure, just presence. One night, while folding linen by the fire, Clara paused and said, "You ever think poor people aren't just missing money, but proof they matter?" Josiah looked up from his whittling. She continued, "My whole life I thought if I had more beauty, more coin, more something, maybe I'd be wanted." He set his knife down. "You think I'm with you because I pity you?" She shook her head. "No, but I still catch myself, holding my breath, waiting for the moment I no longer measure up." He walked to the kitchen shelf and reached up. From behind a jar of sugar, he pulled out a small wooden box. He handed it to her calloused hands, careful. Inside, a pair of silver spoons. Polished, slightly mismatched, but elegant. "I was saving these," he said, "for when the table felt right." She looked at him. "Why now?" He gave a soft smile. "Because it's not just your bread that holds together, Clara. It's you. And I've never seen anything more whole than the way you stay." She closed the lid and held it to her chest. And something inside her, something long kept behind the ribs, let go of the breath it had been holding for years. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with grand declarations. It comes in 2 plates, 2 spoons, and the courage to stop asking if you're allowed to be there. But what happens when you've built a life out of quiet hope and someone dares to speak it out loud? How do you know it's love when no one announces it, but everything around you whispers, "You belong"? The day it happened was ordinary. No parade, no proposal, just the sound of hammering. Clara stepped outside, wiping her hands on her apron, to find Josiah standing beside the cabin door with a wooden plaque in his hand. She tilted her head. "What's that?" He held it out. Her breath caught. It read, "The Finch and Wynne Homestead Est. This year of grace." The letters were carved by hand, slightly uneven, but it was hers, her name, on the door. She stared at it like it was a language she almost didn't recognize. He said, "Didn't think we needed a preacher to make it real." She looked at him. "You sure I was sure when you gave away your last piece of bread to a hungry child," he said. "I was sure when you packed my wagon better than I ever did. And I was sure when you folded my shirts like they were worth something." She blinked fast, words stuck in her throat. He took her hand. "No one gets to measure you anymore, Clara. Not by coin, not by weight, not by who walked away." She nodded, and then finally she smiled without apology. They hung the plaque together, and that night they ate stew by lamplight from mismatched bowls. 2 plates, 2 spoons, and a quiet that didn't ache anymore. Clara no longer needed to knock on doors. Her name was on one, and this time no one would fold it away. Some love stories don't need vows or lace. They just need a place where your name is welcome and your worth is never in question. Clara didn't have silver lace or fine manners. She had calloused hands, quiet strength, and a heart that kept showing up even after being turned away. The man who rejected her never saw the treasure behind her poverty, but someone else did. Not with grand words, not with promises, but with a place at his table, a door left open, and a wooden plaque carved with both their names. She was once a woman passed over for having nothing. Now she's a woman who knows the right kind of love doesn't ask what you brought. It simply says, I'm glad you're here. If Clara's story touched something in you, a memory, a hope, or maybe just a quiet ache, we'd be honored to have you stay a little longer with us here at None. Wild West Saga. Leave us a comment. Have you ever felt rejected for not having enough? Would you like to hear more stories like Clara's about dignity, stillness, and the slow kind of love? Share this video with someone who needs reminding your worth has never been about what you lack. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that start small, but stay with you long after the train leaves the station. Until next time, stay kind, stay steady, stay exactly who you are.